What's up again, everybody? I am here with the Intercontinental Dice Masters champion, Ben Said Scott. What's up, Ben?
Woo! Yeah, you're giving me like good intros, like Arjun Lucan, huh?
Man, I gotta sell it. They sold it so well.
Working on
They're like,
intros.
I gotta start with a really low voice. I gotta lean into the mic, and I gotta get a little sound effect that like has a drum roll. All right, we're gonna talk through all of the cards. We're gonna do a card review for the entirety of the Dark X-Men team pack, and we're gonna give it an A through F ranking. Each card will receive an A through F ranking, and the A through F ranking goes as such. If we give a card an A, we are saying that we think this is a high power level, high meta worthy card. So you could see this card on a Worlds team, a Nationals team. These are that good, they're that powerful, or they're that flexible. If we give a card a B, it's a really strong semi-competitive card, a really powerful win condition, or some sort of a really good ramp option that fits right into some semi-competitive kind of teams. C cards are cards that are just fine. They're just good. They're oftentimes on your teams, no matter if you're running casual or semi-competitive play, because these cards are great to fill in synergies to meet expectations and things that you might need. D cards are cards that could be played and might be played sometimes for a challenge, but they're cards that oftentimes are outpaced by something that does a very similar effect or a very similar job. Maybe it's a little bit better statted than this card that is rated a D, and so this card is playable but not quite up to snuff. You could replace it with something a little bit better. And a card that is an F is a card that is so bad you would never want to put it on your team. Maybe you make jokes about it. Maybe you laugh behind its back and it weeps openly in the shower, holding itself, rocking back and forth. Those are F cards. So let's take it away then. We'll start with all of the Blink characters. This is Blink Biomolecular Displacement Portals. It's a 4-cost mask character with the X-Men affiliation, an 013-123-135 stat line. An interesting stat line that we've seen on all of the other Blinks before it, and it says, while Blink is active, when a player moves a die from their used pile to their prep area, deal 1 damage to that player.
I don't mind it. I think it's a little bit late, really, to the party now that Professor X, old school global, isn't really in the meta anymore, and nothing equivalent to it really exists. There's kind of like Heimdall global and the new PXG, and there's
Exactly.
also the Supreme Intelligence, right?
Mm-hmm. Both of those, I think, are valid reasons to print this card. That being said, I'm not too high on this card because those are really sort of the only utilities for this card.
Yeah, my question is, how many times does it do damage if you move 2 dice over in the same action?
Well, it's worded in a similar effect to some of the other cards like Tabaxi Rogue. So if 1 die moves, then 1 damage. If 2 dice moves, then 2 damage. Which, again, makes it good if you're playing against Heimdall every time they use Heimdall or every time they use this new school PXG.
Yeah, and it's like you could kind of set that up, right? So you could, I mean, I don't know how viable it is, but putting both in your team, the Heimdall and the new PXG, both in your team, because you could theoretically prep 4 dice a turn, and then is your opponent going to be doing that when they can take 4 damage? I like it. It's not great, but I like it.
Of note as well is there's also an action that moves things from your used to prep printed in this set. It's a basic action, so it does have utility in set as well. What is your rating for this card?
A C minus. I think it's just on the verge of playable, I think.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a D. I have a D written down. I'm going to change it to a D plus just because it does have the possibility of hitting this new action as well, which is a pretty fun one. And because of that, I'll give it a D plus, right on the edge of being playable range.
I think this one is one a bit like the Tabaxi Rogue that can get better over time, depending on what comes out. So the Tabaxi Rogue took a massive bump in popularity after Instant War, right? Mm-hmm. Because that was a way to force your opponent to do the 3 dice out of your bag, which did 3 damage. So I think if this gets some kind of similar effect, it could get a buff. And in old Golden, it would be really effective against the Professor X global.
I totally agree. Yeah, this would have a lot of utility in the golden age of Dice Masters competitive or even just casual. It's sort of an easy slot in if people are bringing PXG, which is likely. Yes, and this one does have a huge range of improvement. If they just print a global like PXG, again, or something that moves dice over, just period. This just sees a little bit more play each time they print something like that. The next one is Blink Down the Rabbit Hole, also a 4-cost, same stat line affiliations, and it's important to note that because some of these affiliations will change from card variant to card variant. The ability on this card says, when Blink is blocked, remove her from combat and deal 1 damage to the defending player.
I kind of like this. I gave it a B-. And I think that's mainly because I really like the Bizarro Global, the Kal-El Global as it was before. And I've been looking for kind of ways to use that. And I really like her stat line for this, actually. You can kind of swing in. Are they going to be willing to take 3 or 5 damage if you flip her stats by letting it through? They're probably going to block it. She doesn't have great attack stats. I like it. I don't know if I would pay 4 for it, but I like it.
Yeah, I was thinking about stat flipping this as well, but for 4, it just seems really expensive to focus on buying this, only getting a 3/5 and then stat flipping it. Like, you can get a 3/5 on Nick Fury, and that's a 2-cost. So is this ability that much better that it's worth paying 2 extra energy for to be able to remove her from combat and deal 1 to the defending player each time it's blocked? To me, no, comparatively. And so slotting it in just on that team alone, I don't really see it, for me, being something that I would jump at the chance to do when there are some better options. That being said, even if you picked this up in like a draft or limited format, there are utility, like there's possibilities to use this. So this is not an unplayable card by any means.
Yeah, in limited, I think it'd be actually pretty good. I think with Kree Captain, you kind of have the 4 costs and now 3 costs, kind of. I don't mind her. I quite like her.
Yeah, I gave her a C because she just feels like exactly playable. I'm not jumping at the chance to slot her onto a team because I think she's this perfect win condition, but she can do some work when you need her to. The final Blink is Blink Who's Faster Half Scan. Another 4-drop, same affiliations, and this one straight up just has Infiltrate. Do you like Infiltrate, Ben?
I don't mind it, not on this garbage, because like it's just so pointless, isn't it? This is, for me, this is the definition of a card that's going to go in my binder and just never ever come out ever, because there's so many better options at 4 cost. There's one in this set that's better than this for 4 costs. Whatever. I don't care.
Well, it's kind of interesting because this one feels very, very similar to the Blink Down the Rabbit Hole in like if you pare them down to an exact scenario. Blink Down the Rabbit Hole, if you're putting it on a stat flip team, basically has Infiltrate when it's blocked. This one has Infiltrate, which means it's unblocked. So they kind of play similarly if you think about it in that respect, but I would prefer the other one just a bit more.
I'd rather keep my thing and do 1 damage than let her go through the use part and do 1 damage.
But if you're slapping it on a stat flip
anyway,
team,
don't you?
Yeah, exactly, because the Infiltrate you're keeping it both ways.
I don't know.
They play very similarly if you're slapping both of them onto a stat flip team. One of them just has this keyword that says Infiltrate and is looking for it to go through unblocked. But I think this one's slightly worse because your opponent sees that and is not going to leave that unblocked because they'll stat flip it. Yeah, but they kind of both do that. I would take the other one a little bit more, and so for that reason, I give this one a D.
Yeah, I gave it an F. Yeah.
Make a coaster out of it.
That's what's gonna happen with it for me. So I mean, it's not an F card really. It's a D card. I just don't have any patience for repeated infiltrators.
Let's move on to Dark Beast. The first Dark Beast is Human Experimentation. It's a 2-drop fist character. It's got the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants and the villain affiliations. So 2 affiliations. It's got an 021, 122, 132 stat line. And it says when Dark Beast blocks, Corrupt 2. And if the die you placed in the use pile is a sidekick, then you get to draw and roll a die. So quickly, let's talk about Corrupt 2. So what you do whenever you corrupt is once a corrupt keyword is triggered, you're going to pick either you or the opponent. And that person, whoever is selected, is going to draw the number of dice based on the number in the corrupt keyword. So in this case, it says corrupt 2. So whoever's picked is going to draw 2 dice. And then you, as the person triggering corrupt or the person with corrupt, will then select the die of those 2 that are drawn to put into the used pile, and the other one goes back to the bag. So you can either do this to yourself, or you can actually do it to your opponent, making them draw dice and then picking which one you want to put into the used pile, which is pretty cool. So if you look at it from that scenario, from that perspective, you can trigger this on yourself and then put a sidekick into the used pile and then draw and roll a die, which is really, really strong. And you could trigger this on your opponent and then just elect to put one of their sidekicks, or if you pull 2 sidekicks, then you get the same effect. For you, it's like churn plus ramp. For your opponent, it's like positive churn for them, which is not very good, but ramp if you do the sidekick. But if you do it to your opponent, you can hit something that is really good. I like this card a lot. I think it's pretty strong, pretty solid. It doesn't like slap down onto a team immediately. It sort of fits into one of those very specific corrupt teams. But I think it's all sort of packaged into itself. I think this, for me, is a fun little card. I give it a C+.
Yeah, I was kind of super pumped about this card when I first looked at it, and I was like, oh, this is going to be an A or a B. I'm really, really into the corrupt keyword. I think it's going to be really good. But then I kind of read it again, and then the timing of it's a bit weird when it blocks. The corrupt part's fine, but the draw a die and roll it, I don't know if I want to do that when I'm blocking. You're just going to roll the character and it's going to go to use.
That's true.
Which is kind of funky. Nevertheless, I wish that bit was May, but I suppose you don't have to put a sidekick in the use pile. You could put a character, but then it's good. Corrupt, I think, is going to be good. But yeah, the timing of it puts me off a little bit and makes me bring it down to a C+. I put it as a C+ as well.
So we're even on that. We both think C+. I agree. The timing does kind of mess with it a little bit because you can't do any purchasing. You use that for globals. But if you trigger it on yourself, then you churn a sidekick and then also churn a sidekick, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. Ultimately, you're churning 2 dice, which is good.
Yeah. The next Dark Beast is Dark Beast Impostor. This is a 2-drop fist as well. This one has the X-Men affiliation and the villain affiliation, and this one just straight up has Infiltrate. I will tell you my impressions on Infiltrate. I don't think Infiltrate is that bad. I don't think it's the best keyword in the world. It's not the most competitive keyword, but I think a 2-drop Infiltrator with 2 affiliations and a solid stat line with low fielding costs, paying 1 to field on level 2 and 1 to field on level 3, which is a little pricey for a 2-drop. But I think all of that packaged together means you can slap this onto some sort of a casual, fun Infiltrate team, or if Infiltrate's pretty good, then it becomes a natural little shoe-in. And it can go onto a team-up team, subbing in this for something else that was like a 3-drop double affiliated. This has a little bit of upside because it gives you the Infiltrate keyword, which is useful before the actual team-up slams down and wins you the game. So I think this is a pretty decent little card. This one teeters between C+ and B- for me, so I'll start with a B- and see what you say.
Yeah, I'm a little bit less keen on Infiltrate, I think. I mean, it's fine. I think this is going to be a natural fit for basically it's going to replace the Grey Hunter just because of it has better stats and better fielding costs. Although it doesn't have a stronger attack, but it doesn't have that 2 fielding cost on top level, which is Grey Hunter's biggest problem. For the team up thing, I feel like X-Men and villain, the villain is kind of a wash on a team up team because you're in competitive, you're going to have a villain. Almost naturally, you have to, at this point, have like a Shriek or a Scarlet Witch or something like that. So, I get it in casual for sure. And it's not a bad card. I personally would give it a C, but I can see it ranging up to, I said a C for me and B for everyone else because I feel like people like Infiltrate.
Well, let's move on to the final 2-drop Dark Beast. This is Mad Scientist, and this one has the villain affiliation and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants affiliation. And this one says, while active, when a character die you control uses Corrupt, draw and roll a die.
I like this one the best out of all of them. Again, 2-drop with 2 affiliations is good. But I think I like Corrupt as a keyword. I think it's really interesting. I think Corrupt is going to be good. And this gives it a ramp mechanic. I don't know if Corrupt has a win condition, but yeah, I like it. I like it a lot.
I really like Corrupt as well. I like the idea of taking someone's carefully plotted out bag and just kind of turning it on its head. I agree. It might not have a win condition, but slamming down a couple of we're going to talk about some of the other corrupt characters coming up here in a minute. I think there are several that are really, really good, and this pairs nicely with that. So giving it a ramp option is a solid idea, both thematically, casually, and also semi-competitively. So I give this a C+. This one teetered for me between C+ and B-, just because it is a ramp option for a specific type of team.
Yeah, I gave it C+ as well.
Okay, I'm interested in talking about these next three, because these next three are just walls of text that require you to do a lot of thinking, and I feel like a lot of back and forth could go from it. The first one is Mimic, Best of the X-Men. This is a 3-drop mask character with the X-Men affiliation. The Mimic stat line that is just so bonkers weird. 011, 111, 112. Reminds me of the old Mystique stat line. So very weird. And this one is just a straight up wall. It says, when Mimic is fielded, choose target opposing character die, replacing all prior choices. They didn't say previous because they couldn't fit it on the card. Your active Mimic character dice copy the printed stats of that character die level for level until you no longer have an active Mimic character die or a new Mimic die is fielded. While your opponent has more than one active character die of the chosen die, Mimic gets an additional +3/+3. So what this essentially is saying is when this is fielded, it gains the stats of something that your opponent has, and if they have more than one of it, then it gains those stats plus this 3/3 buff. So essentially, this is a 3-drop. Its stats are contingent upon whatever your opponent has in the field, and it's contingent upon your opponent having more than one of said thing. So like if you field this early in the game and your opponent has a sidekick, well, then this is just a sidekick. And then if they have 2 sidekicks, it would be a 4/4 that you paid 3 for, and it doesn't do anything else. If they have, I don't know, just pick a random card that is like middle of the road that might be on a team. I mean, if it's, let's just say if it's a Shriek, like this target's a Shriek, then this is a 3-cost 3/3 that does nothing.
Yeah.
And if they had 2 Shrieks somehow, then it's a 3-cost 6/6. I think the ability is super cool and thematic. I just don't think that a card that does something only with stats and nothing else, and no other upsides, like it's one affiliation, it's the X-Men affiliation, which is good, especially in this set. But for me, this is very much a D.
Yes, I kind of agree with you. I gave it a C, but I could probably lower that. Here was my thinking. Parasite was my thinking. Parasite has good stats, and then this makes it better because they're probably going to have a couple of parasites out.
So it's a 3-drop, and then this Parasite on top is a 2/4, right?
3/4.
It's a 3/4. Okay, so it's a 3-drop. You field it, and then target Parasite,
6/7.
and then it becomes a 6/7. Let's say you have 2 6/7s. You paid 6 for that, and you have to. Your opponent has to have 2 Parasites active. If they remove 1 Parasite, or they just choose not to field 1 Parasite, then you have 2 3-cost Parasites in the field. It just doesn't, it doesn't do it for me because it's not doing anything else.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, right? It doesn't do anything else.
It's cool, it's thematic, but to me it's a D.
Okay, I'll drop it to a D.
Okay, I convinced you.
That's fine.
I convinced you. All right, the next one is Mimic Caliban. This is also a 3-drop. This one says, while active, when an opposing non-sidekick character die is fielded, all of your Mimic character dice that are active become copies of that character die until you know. Oh my god, I'm just gonna read this again. That was terrible. I could have done that a lot better.
Yeah, how did they have like? I'm sure the other abilities on the current mimics are way more complicated, and yet these seem like so long-winded.
Yes, yeah, but they're precise. We know what they do.
That's true.
So I give them that. While active, when an opposing non-sidekick character die is fielded, all of your active Mimic character dice become copies of that character die until you no longer have an active Mimic character die or a new opposing non-sidekick character die is fielded. Your Mimic dice also retain this ability as written on this card, so that obviously it can do it again and again and again.
I think that they've left no room for questions with their text. Yeah, it's okay. I mean, I really like the ability, actually. It's a really cool ability, but then your opponent chooses what character you have, so it's kind of terrible.
It's not terrible, though, and I agree with you. 100%. I think it's a really cool ability. I think it's super thematic for the character, and something that, like, in a vacuum, you go, man, that's super awesome. And then in practice, you go, oh, man, he gave me a blink with infiltrate. Dang it.
Exactly. Yeah.
It becomes sort of just not really that great. I mean, you could do it though. You could run it because it at least gains everything. So that's nice. I don't know. It just seems like,
well, I mean, you think your opponent's going to run something that is good.
You would, but then you would also want to run something that is good.
Yeah, this just lets you. Funnily enough, I think a lot of the time, good cards are their own counters. A lot of the time, so Dreadnought's its own counter, Collector's kind of its own counter, Shriek's kind of its own counter. So you kind of, you have this back and forth without having to have that card on your team.
And I think that's a good commentary and a good point. So like, let's pretend that this copies, best case scenario, this copies Dreadnought. Now you don't have to run Dreadnought, but they can fix that by fielding multiple characters, or they could just field a character the following turn and not push with a single sidekick or whatever they want to do to trigger range.
Yep.
So it's like a half measure almost. I'm going to not run, that really meta-defining card, and I'm going to run this one because it can sort of be a catch-all. I don't have to play these 3 cards. I can play maybe 2, instead of all 3. So it's interesting in that respect. Is it good? I gave it a C- just because I feel like it's not enough of a catch-all, and it's a little too contingent upon what your opponent does. And so really, really good players will find themselves more easily playing around it than not playing around it. But that's just me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I talked earlier about how the Blink card I gave a B because I was like, oh, I know I'm going to build a team around this. With this card, I know I'm going to take it out of the binder to be like, oh, maybe I'll consider it. And then I know I'm going to put it back in the binder if I'm not going to put it on the team.
Yep.
So I'm going to give it a C-, because that's how it is for me.
All right, you ready? This is the last Mimic. I'm most interested in this one, and I think we can have a good talk about it. This is Mimic, Flying, Blasting, Slashing. It's a 4-drop mask character, so they upped it from 3 to 4. Let's see if it's worth the 1 extra energy that you have to pay. Still an X-Men affiliated character. This one says, when Mimic is fielded, choose target opposing character die. Roll Mimic and the chosen die. If either rolls an energy face, that's either, then KO both character dice. If both roll character faces, then KO the opposing die, and all of your active Mimic character dice become copies of that die until you no longer have an active Mimic character die, or until another one's fielded, blah, blah, blah. Your Mimic character dice also blah, blah, blah. No one cares about that part. So it's super interesting. If you look at the numbers and crunch the numbers, so like out of the 36 possible rolls that you could do with 2 dice, 36 possible chances, you can boil it down to 9 out of the 36 times you're going to actually roll 2 character faces. And that's 25% chance, right? So you have a 25% chance to actually get the second part of the card. If you don't, which is far more likely, 75% of the time, this is essentially just targeted removal that you're paying 4 for, and it cycles itself, which already is pretty good, right? This just KOs something, and you can play it again next turn. It's like if you combined Excessive Force, which was a basic action from the Ultramar set that dealt 6 to a target character die, target opposing character die. If you took that, you upped the damage to infinite because it KOs it no matter what, and then it had like a boomerang effect that always triggered. That would be a pretty good card. But do you buy Excessive Force very often? But then 25% of the time, not only is this targeted removal, but it's also a body in the field that takes some positive effects because you're not using this on a sidekick unless you have to. You're using this on something that's pretty good. So it could be like insanely good, or it can be pretty good, but usually you don't put this on a team because targeted removal is like almost worth a slot. What do you think?
Oh no, I really like this card. I think this card is super good. It's always targeted removal, and traditionally, 4 cost is where it's fit. So if you think about all the intimidators, they're all 4 costs. All the ones that don't have crazy awkward stipulations. This is guaranteed removal, regardless of what they roll. And then on top of that, you have the ability to re-trigger the targeted removal every turn. It's always going to be cycling. It's 1 to field on 2 of its faces. That's a bit annoying. That's really good. I think that by itself would be a B for me. I think that's where it fits. But then you also give it a 25% chance of just becoming a copy of any die you want that they have out. That's super good. I don't know. I really rate this card. I give it a B+.
I think to myself, well, if it's 75% of the time, it's just removing something each time you roll it on a character face. So 75% of the time, like what card is played at high levels that is specifically for removing, like KOing specifically? Like what card
Well,
is
it's 100%,
specifically for that?
100% is KO, right? Well, I mean, you take this as the secondary shriek counter. So you have shriek, and then you have this. So if they have a shriek, you can use this unit to shriek every round, and then you can worry about shrieking whatever you want to shriek.
See, I could see that because then they'd replay it and they'd have to either shriek the shriek or shriek the
Yeah, you think
the
about
mimic.
the uncommon blob, right? That's a card that gets played, although rare blob, this functions in essentially the same way, and they're both four costs.
There's a quite a possibility that a second line of defense, a la having Shriek and Dwarf Wizard 2 years ago was really good. Maybe this is sort of in that same vein. Yeah, it is 100% of the time. Every time you roll this on a character face, it's going to remove something from the board.
Yeah, I mean, so imagine playing this with Collector, right? Now you can run a non-villain style Collector team. You run this with the Mimic, which is they're both four cost masks. So you save 2 masks. You kind of do the Mimic, the Morph attack, or you save the 2 masks to your opponent's turn. Pay 2 masks to KO something. I don't know.
See, now you convinced me. All you had to say,
Super
all
good.
you had to say was just throw it on a collector team, and now you're 100% right. See, I originally gave this a C plus. Like this to me was borderline on that B range of like slotting into semi-competitive teams consistently. But yeah, you're right. A secondary line of defense when it comes to removal and blanking and stuff like that is worth it, especially if things aren't just going to murder you with a tune, which is still possible. I don't know. Maybe that is the future still, but totally. I'll give it a B plus as well because you've convinced me. That's a solid card.
I mean,
No, it's solid. That's a good point.